Okay, colleagues, I think we can get started. My name's Muhammed Patel. I'm a senior economist at TIPS, and I work in our sustainable growth area where we cover sustainable transitions, the decarbonization of value chains, and particularly important value chains in the country, as well as tracking the overall state of the just transition and how this manifests in various value chains and what some of the policy priorities are. So today we have quite a power-packed session ahead of us. We've obviously got the main focus of the TIPS forum as small businesses and small business inclusion, but alongside that, there are obviously clear sustainability imperatives that we have as a country. So in the course of the presentations today, we're gonna dip into different value chains and different issues, particularly as they relate to sustainability and small business development and inclusion. So just very quickly, we exploring some really important themes, starting off with the just transition and, the role of SMMEs in the just transition. What are some of the barriers that we can see emerging from the research team at TIPS? We've also got presentations on electric and electronic equipment, so waste, and, where we are in South Africa, what some of the priorities are around that, what are some of the policy thinking that we can apply to small business development around there. We've got the township economy and looking specifically at small businesses in that setting and what are some of the unique challenges that they face and where policy can play a role. We've also looking at the oceans economy, and we're looking at the construction sector as well after the tea break. So obviously you guys are here not to listen to me, but to listen to the experts that we have presenting here today. So the way we're going to structure it is we're going to do 3 inputs that should take us to tea time around, I think it's 3 p.m. Yeah, it's 3 p.m. And what we'll do is we'll do those 3 inputs. We'll have a bit of a Q&A, and then we'll break for tea, and then we'll have the remaining 2 inputs, and then we can do a bit of a Q&A around that. So the structure, I'm just going to very briefly introduce the speakers, and then we'll move over to the presentations. Immediately after the presentation, if there are like 1 or 2 burning questions of clarity, we can take it. But if they're more substantive questions, let's park it for the Q&A. Okay, great. So starting off, we have our team from TIPS, and the presentation is by 2 of my colleagues to my right, Elize and Michael. Just by way of introduction, Elize is a sustainability expert with over 15 years of experience promoting sustainable development, particularly in Africa. Elize has a master's degree in sustainable development and management from Stellenbosch University School of Public Leadership in partnership with the Sustainability Institute. Dr. Michael, I should say, holds a PhD in political science from Stellenbosch University, where his research is focused on the green economy and environmental governance in South Africa. So over to you, Elize and Michael, and we can kick off the session.
Thanks, Muhammad, for that lovely introduction. And good afternoon to everyone here in the room. So essentially, before we start our presentation today, I would just like to sort of give you an indication of where we're coming from from the perspective of our research paper. So the paper that we submitted to the forum essentially falls part of a larger research project that myself and Elize are doing by looking at newcomers to the green industries or the just transition, especially newcomers that are marginalized people in our society, so people with disabilities, female-owned and youth-owned businesses. Early on, and they face a number of not only opportunities within these green industries, but also certain challenges or barriers. And because they are in this early startup phase, usually about 2 to 3 years in, these were the people that we were looking at, trying to understand what their challenges are within the just transition. And we'll get into those barriers in a moment. So we can just, yeah. So essentially, as the world continues to face the increased challenges as a result of climate change, there's become a demand for sustainable alternatives, essentially. So we see in various green industries, ranging from waste to energy to water, um, and we see them sort of offering these valuable paths for a sustainable future in Africa and specifically in South Africa. And what we have found is that they are not only here to reduce environmental impacts, but they're also a source for creating new markets, creating new green jobs. So as a whole, if we sort of lay out this context of the just transition, when we tend to speak about the just transition, the conversation is often dominated by talks of how corporations can change their ways, how they can perhaps adopt more sustainable methods of doing things, adopt water-saving measures, renewable energy, and so forth. But myself and Elize wanted to look at it from a different point of view. We wanted to see what is the perspective of those entrepreneurs by the virtue or by the nature of the work that they are doing, that they are green entrepreneurs. And these are from the waste picker to the upcycler in a small community, upcycling plastics for fashion or for any other purposes. But also those environmental innovators, those creating or adapting new technologies to either benefit their communities socioeconomically, but also environmentally. So these SMMEs or entrepreneurs, they occupy a unique position within green industries. They're often found to be quick to adapt to the changing technological changes. They embody the sort of entrepreneurial spirit to benefit not only the environment, but also the socioeconomic conditions of their communities. So by empowering them, we can essentially promote what we call in our research paper, the democratization of sustainable development, whereby we can ensure that the benefits that are coming out of this just transition are shared widely across our society in South Africa. So a key focus of our research was that we wanted to look at these marginalized groups and attempt to emphasize the just in the just transition. So we looked at these youth enterprises, we looked at these female-owned and people with disabilities-owned entrepreneurs. And as you will see today, a lot of the challenges that they face are very much similar to what many other SMMEs face, but oftentimes they face unique challenges that are either as a result of their socioeconomic conditions of where they're from, the area that they're from, or even just the market that they are trying to break into. So the opportunities available to them does not or is not without some challenges, as these groups are frequently encounter challenges related to access to limited funding, access to certain markets, and also struggling with understanding whether it be provincial or local bylaws, skills that are related to running a business. Oh, we already did. Okay, you can move back. Sorry, but yeah, you can leave it there. So there is no doubt that the negative impact of climate change will essentially worsen South Africa's triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. So we thus face a difficult task of balancing our economic development with protecting the environment, but also the socioeconomic concerns in the country, especially given South Africa's carbon intensity. However, during this phase, we have seen that South Africa has committed to transforming South Africa into a low carbon and climate resilient and just society by 2030, which are mostly outlined in the NDP 2030 and also the Just Transition Framework. So for the most part, what we've seen is that countries like South Africa have looked at the green economy from a perspective of what we term green growth, which seeks to address the fundamental issue of protecting the environment while ensuring economic development. However, what we argue is that given the context of South Africa, socioeconomic and historical context, we need to consider that the just transition cannot be achieved if we do not address social and environmental justice. So the shift towards a just transition, as outlined in our various policies and plans laid out by the PCC and other bodies, presents us with an opportunity to create a more equitable and inclusive low carbon economy, especially for those who are marginalized. So the approach that is taken needs to be one that is very much holistic and intentional. If we are going to support these small, medium, and micro enterprises, especially those run by marginalized groups, this approach needs to be one that is very much geared towards their needs, towards their challenges. So supporting these SMMEs is an opportunity for the country to not only promote sustainable development, but also promote and stimulate economic growth at a grassroots level. Now, these small businesses, especially those within our communities, are the ones that are often at the forefront of developing radical environmental innovations and responding to their conditions. And they are particularly well placed to address environmental and socioeconomic challenges, especially within township communities and rural areas. Now, these SMMEs can be key in addressing our climate change challenges through innovative practices and adaptation methods. And these, what we've termed local green enterprises, they often offer low-cost and practical solutions to enhance community resilience. As I mentioned, they are very much quick to adapt to the changing business environment. But we found that grassroots local green enterprises or entrepreneurs have been early adopters of these radical innovations. So by supporting these enterprises, government can essentially assist in strengthening the resilience of our local communities, and especially in relation to climate-related risks, because many of these green enterprises, as I mentioned, are centered in our communities. They provide very much positive impact on local economic development, especially given that South Africa faces high levels of unemployment, with the just transition providing us with an opportunity to create these new, so what we term green jobs. So although we have seen SMMEs in South Africa climb in recent years, especially green SMMEs, the economic ramifications of COVID, for example, have had an increasingly difficult or increasingly created an increasingly difficult environment for these green SMMEs to survive. So there's also a need to support these SMMEs in not only overcoming the economic ramifications of the COVID pandemic, but also secure their long-term survival. So the just transition, therefore, cannot be achieved in isolation, as these SMMEs are essential for local economic job creation and opening up these new green markets. So in the green economy has brought with it considerable economic opportunities. Since its popularization following the 2008-2009 financial crisis, and we have seen an increased number of these green enterprises, which have indicated essentially a need or a demand for green services and products. So in sectors which we've looked at in water, energy, and waste, we've seen local entrepreneurs responding to these opportunities. So I will hand over to my colleague Elize to take you through some of the opportunities that, or rather the low-hanging fruit that we said that these SMMEs have sought to benefit.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, so I think it's really exciting. You know, what we're talking about today is reality. It's not fiction. So many of you might have seen the Black Panther movie, you know, where this beautiful technological world, and what we want for Africa really is to be at the forefront of responding to the climate crisis, but also to provide clean drinking water, to actually have renewable energy access, affordable clean energy, and then also in terms of our waste in our communities, to really be able to respond to better waste management systems. So Michael and I actually cherry-picked these three sectors, waste, water, and energy, because that's where we saw most activity. from entrepreneurs responding. We do acknowledge that there's 8 green industries. We didn't look at the full spectrum of all of them, but we wanted to really deep dive into these 3 sectors. And what we've done, we've had a focus group series, which is available on the TIPS website. You'll also find it in the link on the program, where we actually engaged with these entrepreneurs active in these industries. We did it over a 6-month period, but we also invited the incubators and CEDA and many other organizations to actually talk to us about their programs. And what was quite interesting, what we saw in the energy sector, just to give you a little bit of a brief on that, we saw very active female engagement in actually PV installation with youth and female owned. Tomorrow, a lot of these entrepreneurs will be exhibiting, and we'll be able to give them some visibility and speak to them more about their challenges. We also saw an interest in entrepreneurs really wanting to be part of independent power producer programs on a smaller scale. But we'll talk to the barriers around that in terms of credibility and track record and capacity. But we've definitely seen them. And energy management, we've spoken to entrepreneurs, actually have clients in Australia doing remote energy management, looking at what their needs are in energy management from a consulting perspective, low overheads, but they could then partner with someone who would then be the electrician and the PV installation. But that's an area that was quite interesting. Then moving to the water sector, if we're looking at infrastructure maintenance, we all have seen a bit of a decline in our water infrastructure across South Africa. The flooding in KZN had a huge impact. And also the fertilization plant that exploded in KZN and really caused a provincial disaster. We've seen entrepreneurs responding to water treatment, even from coal mines and the acid main drainage in treating water in communities. We've also looked at selling clean drinking water in a community, which is actually supposed to be a government service. Many of the entrepreneurs are jumping into areas where government would provide a service in the past, but they're no longer able to do so. The entrepreneur would either have a 1-minute shower in an informal settlement with a water tank, and they would also then use the grey water to actually feed into the agricultural side. So really low cost, low overheads, low cost, but they've got technical skills. And what we've seen, especially in the water sector, there's a program called Municipreneurs from 2 years ago from the Presidential Unemployment Stimulus Program. 300 graduates that was unemployed, sitting 2 years at home, went on the program, and they were encouraged to start water businesses, water sector businesses. These were engineers, water technicians, and many of them have found really innovative solutions to bring clean drinking water as a service, delivering it to their community, or in the logistics of it, or the actual treatment of the water. So yeah, I think what we could also look at the waste sector, for us, it was quite important to look into the informal entrepreneurs as well. It's very important that we don't leave them behind. It's not everybody who owns a vehicle and who can transport waste from one mall to another place, to a buyback center, but recognizing the role of the informal sector is really important. And we've seen many, many opportunities in all types of recycling, from organic waste, e-waste, your PET, glass, aluminium, and then also, all of them are very, specific waste streams. But a lot of the information that we've gained in our desktop research is from Greencape's market intelligence reports. We've drawn down on that in terms of the markets, the investment flows, and also some of the technologies that's low cost. It's not something that's patented. It's something that the entrepreneur can easily access. So now I think it's maybe also important to say that we're not saying there's millions of opportunities in these green industries. We're not trying to say that it's, it's something that is still very, I think, not so visible for all the entrepreneurs seeking opportunities, but they are there. And people are responding, and there's good market uptake. Now we can talk quickly to the barriers. I think we have 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask Michael.
Yeah, so essentially, as I mentioned earlier, even though they do face very similar challenges to other SMMEs in the country. Many of them lack the sort of or have a limited track record, which makes it very much difficult for them to also access funding or access finance. In the energy sector, we've seen that marginalized communities and individuals have frequently encountered issues of having access to market, specifically people with disabilities, and they find it difficult to access these markets compared to more established, larger firms. So securing these finance has been a particular issue for them, especially these newcomers. Although there have been development programs run by government and the private sector, these SMMEs continue to face these finance challenges, which is very much a complex issue, as we've sort of divided this into internal challenges as well as external challenges, where we find that internal challenges that many of these entrepreneurs, although they are innovators by nature, they're not necessarily business people. So they lack certain business skills required to run a successful business and to make them bankable in order to get funding. So we have seen that there is a need, because of their limited track record, because of these sort of skills that they require, there's certain things that they need support with, especially in dealing with skills, resources, and then also things like infrastructure. We had one case study where one female entrepreneur has got, I think, 11 or 12 development programs, but still to this day continues to struggle to gain access to finance. So now we're also talking about them needing support in terms of de-risking these entrepreneurs to make them more bankable so that they can get access to this funding. And also we need to also understand the nature of these entrepreneurs. Many of these entrepreneurs are driven to entrepreneurship because of their socioeconomic contexts. So many of them that we've spoken to, some in the waste sector, have noted that they saw an issue of plastic waste in the area and they decided to do something about that. They had a degree in fashion or studied fashion, and they decided to upcycle plastics in the area. So solving an environmental issue in the area. Some people saw their waste business as an opportunity to create environmental and social change and create jobs in the areas. So there is this need to support them, but to also be intentional about the support that we are providing them. Now, with SMMEs being faced with their own internal issues as well, with things and external things related to finance and their compliance and skills, there are also things related to some burdensome regulations. Many of them felt that because of their work that they were doing in the green space, that the bylaws within their communities and within the municipalities was not necessarily giving them the freedom or the support needed for them to grow their business or to make a success of their business. Some in our study that we interviewed even felt that some of the policies were a bit behind in times, especially when it comes to technological innovations, which made it very much difficult for them, in addition to the other issues like limited track record, for them to getting government tenders or municipal waste management tenders. So there's essentially a need to look towards the long-term sustainability of these green enterprises. We need to start looking at providing them with the necessary support that speaks to their specific needs, not just throwing money at the problem and saying, hey, go sort it out yourself. But we need to realize that they require these skills, they require these sort of resources, because many of them are not motivated by a search for profit. They want to make their communities better. They want to make the areas in what they're living a much more better place, but at the same time, create jobs and also protect the environment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that input and that presentation, specifically around the just transition. So do we have any burning questions, issues of clarity? Remember that we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. Okay, so I see no hands, so we can move on to the next presentation. Cool. So while we're just bringing the next presentation up, I'm just going to introduce the speakers. So today we're joined by Paul and Aysha. Paul Jones is a director of Lumec, an economic research organization that provides services to support evidence-based decision-making in green and circular economy projects. Paul has more than 16 years of experience. Paul, you look very young for 16 years of experience. Paul has more than 16 years of experience working on a diverse range of projects across South Africa. He's joined today by Aysha. Aysha Lotta is an environmental and mineral law consultant and researcher focusing primarily on the Anglophone African countries. Her research focuses on extended producer responsibility, integrated environmental management, and transformative negotiations. She's currently pursuing an interdisciplinary PhD in private law and chemical engineering at the University of Cape Town. Great to have you here, guys, and over to you. Yeah, you sure. You can have the...
Thank you. Thanks so much for that and for the compliment, even though I don't feel that young. Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity for us to present today. I think most of the nuts and bolts of the discussion is going to be handled by Aysha, but I think today the focus really is on the work that we've been doing as part of the Sustainable Recycling Industries program in South Africa. We are looking at two kind of policy instruments that we've been developing that are in process. The national WEEE policy, and just WEEE stands for Waste, Electronic and Electrical Equipment. It's an acronym for e-waste. So we'll probably use e-waste and WEEE interchangeably, but essentially it's electronic waste. And we've got a draft policy out at the moment, and we're developing norms and standards which are going to kind of govern the WEEE management value chain. And we're just looking at some of the linkages today between those policies and industrial policy in South Africa related to SMME development. And the clicker's not working again. Anyway, just a quick background. So the SRI program in South Africa has been running for about the last 4 to 5 years. It has been running in other countries for the last 15 years. And as you can see, the kind of countries that the SRI program has been operating in. And I think the benefit of having that kind of coverage in a lot of the kind of global South countries is that we've been able to share learnings across different countries. For example, like Colombia and Peru are a lot further along in terms of their programs. They've developed their policies, their norms and standards. They've developed curriculum and other programs that we've been able to actually learn from. So the benefit is that we have been able to kind of share learnings across the global South. Can jump to the next and skip past that. And yeah, so I think just before kind of handing over to Aysha, in terms of context and understanding the problem, electronic waste is one of the fastest growing waste streams on the planet. It is generally not understood very well. And I think a challenge is that it's extremely complex. So if you look at what is considered EEE or electronic and electrical equipment, it's anything that has a cable or a battery that's powered with a cable or battery. So it literally ranges from the bulb inside that projector to those lights, to the screens, to TVs, washing machines. And within those products, there's a huge range of different types of waste streams: glass, ceramics, wood, plastics. And within plastics, many, many types of plastics. So it's a very complex waste stream, which requires quite a coordinated approach to managing. And I suppose with that, there are a lot of environmental and social impacts, negative impacts, if not managed correctly. Hazardous materials that can get into the environment. We've just kind of put some things there that are a snapshot of a global report, but there's major health and environmental issues if not dealt with correctly. But there are also obviously a lot of opportunities if correct management of e-waste can be done, because I think across the entire value chain, there are opportunities in a range of areas within that value chain. So I think what's really required in South Africa is a strong overarching policy framework, which we haven't had in the e-waste space, linked to local action and local response to that policy. That kind of refers to local government understanding how to respond to national policy, but also then collection mechanisms, proper collection mechanisms, as well as compliant WEEE management operators. So you'll probably see it everywhere. There's people burning e-waste on the side of the road and smashing e-waste, and that does release pollutants, chemicals into the environment. If that can be collected properly and sent to compliant recyclers that can process that, there's much more value in that value chain, even for the waste picker who's collecting that item. So I think, in summary, it's a major opportunity area, but it has to be done in a specific way. And I think that's why, as a SHREE program, there are a few objectives that we essentially are focusing on to help create that conducive framework in this country. So there are 4 outcomes. The first one is around policy, establishing kind of a policy framework and legislative framework. So Aysha is going to touch on the WEEE policy in a second. The second objective is normative requirements. So as you all know, there's norms and standards for waste to landfill. There's a variety of norms and standards for composting, norms and standards for managing organic waste. We're developing norms and standards for the management of e-waste, e-waste management. The third objective is around business optimization and value chains, and I'll very briefly touch on that at the end. And finally, solutions for problematic fractions. It's less of a focus in South Africa, but we are also engaging around some webinars and engaging with stakeholders around the transition, just energy transition, and what that means in terms of solar PV, electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, and the problematic fractions that come out of e-waste. So yeah, I'll hand over to Aysha to go into the policy and norms and standards.
Unnecessary tension by leaving things off the slide. But hi, thank you so much, Paul, for giving the problem and the promise of e-waste. But of course, we're really hoping to shift that dial towards more of a promise. And that is what the policy in tandem with the norms and standards is hoping to achieve. So you have the policy as this overarching framework, and then the norms and standards bring in specificity to the interface between WEEE operators, e-waste management operators, and the more often unheard voice in the value chain, which is those engaged in separation outside of source activities. And those are kind of referred to people as waste reclaimers or waste pickers. And then the second voice that's also not really heard and very ill understood is the SMME sector. So I will be kind of clarifying how we've tried to elucidate that voice in our policy and norms and standards. The main objectives, as you can see at the bottom there, I'll just go through each very briefly. The main objective that really speaks to waste reclaimer integration is the support and acknowledgement of the necessity for collaboration and partnership. This aligns with the Industrial Policy Action Plan, which focuses on inclusive growth and job creation, especially in previously disadvantaged communities. And ultimately, the WEEE policy and the implementation thereof is done through the Policy Steering Committee. And it is very explicitly stated that adequate representation of waste reclaimers need to be on that steering committee. So as to inform and really legitimize any decisions made. The next voice that I'd like to focus on is obviously SMMEs, why we've all gathered here. There's lots of people that have incredible experience, hands-on experience, and I've heard from different researchers today that's just like sparked my imagination with this, but these are the overarching objectives, and hopefully we can unpack them further and align them with other researchers. So when it comes to creating a level playing field within the policy, it really provides a legal clarity and purpose. So when it comes to legal clarity, WEEE is regulated by a plethora of regulations. It is completely incomprehensible for most people to, and even myself, sometimes get my head around. So the WEEE policy is really trying to isolate and clarify what laws exist, how they work, and the roles, the stakeholders that play a role in that regulatory space. We then really focus on developing the repair and reuse economy for that space of innovation to be permitted. The policy provides that clarity, but it also then allows, hopefully, more specificity to the extended producer responsibility regulations, which has various specific product notices, and one of which is electrical and electronic equipment. And what it's trying to do there is ensure that producers internalize the costs, the social and environmental costs that are often externalized to communities, local municipalities that are not equipped to deal with this kind of complex waste stream. The collaboration point, I just want to emphasize that there is a clear implementation and action plan that's dedicated to co-working facilities. So as the policy and the norms and standards work together, their aim is really to find those points of integration and pool resources and expertise through these kinds of facilities. The third is enabling sustainable investment in infrastructure and technology developments that obviously will create particular niche areas within the WEEE management value chain, and those specific parts of the process can be quite complex, but it also can be very accessible, like collection and the initial disassembly and sorting processes, rather than the full recovery process that we see in formal recycling. So forming cooperatives or partnerships in that value chain is very important to try and start establishing that economies of scale, and that also touches in on regionalization, because that's where we're probably going to have to get going. So building education structures and personal expertise also really highlighted as an objective within the policy. What we're doing from our side is curriculum development. So it's in its nascent phase, and we have a SACWA approved curriculum, all modular based, trying to make sure that people can focus in on what they actually really want to learn. And focus on specific skill sets. The circular economy inspired framework is really there to open up business opportunities to look into repair, refurbishment, and innovative recycling solutions. Shame, I'm so sorry, I'm going through this so quickly because I know I've got like 2 seconds left, or not. I've got 10 minutes. Okay, let's all just take a second here. Okay. So, resource mobilization, that's a big topic of kind of heated debate. How do we make access of financial access available to SMMEs? This is another focus or another key objective, and the hope is that there will become these funding opportunities and mechanisms that come out of EPR, the extended producer responsibility fee that's being charged to producers, to try and kind of plug it into specific, I say, problematic zones like WEEE plastics, for example. It's complex. Paul's clarified that, and we need to focus those fees in those areas. Obviously, these objectives all overlap, and a lot of policy kind of alignments with other policy has been written up in the paper that we've written, so it's out there in the world. You can take a look at it and criticize it, bring it back to us. So we challenge you all to do this, or don't, or rather don't. It's fine. So the norms and standards, unlike the WEEE policy, the norms and standards is very specific to the post-consumer value chain or the management of WEEE. It's important to note the limitations of a norms and standards. It can and cannot achieve certain things. So whatever is outside of the scope would fall more into guideline documents and policy. What is in the scope really is this guidance of the interface between the formal and the informal sector, so that the formal sector can benefit from the efficacy or efficiency, of the informal sector in terms of collection, reuse, and handling, but also ensure activities that are potentially harmful are restricted. Just to clarify, we've got norms and standards, which is basically on the same level as other regulations. So it's law. Right, so here you can see the WEEE management activities that we have clarified within the norms and standards. And all of this is directed towards reuse and restoring functionality over the traditional material recovery through recycling processes. Maintaining functionality is the first thing that we want to ensure within this space, because it has a ripple effect. If you have easier access to a laptop, then you have easier access to the internet, easier access to different markets and research that you can rely on. So it does have that ripple effect. You can see in these norms and standards that they do try and promote recovery by focusing in on those specific outlined sections with separation outside of source, collection, handling, sorting for reuse, pre-dismantling, preparation for reuse. They're all where you see a key point of integration for the informal sector, whereas small-scale collection, closed consumer collection, that's where the drop-off sites that you see at Woolies or at Checkers or ShopRite, they might have those bins that you see for e-waste. That's what that is. And then the small-scale dismantling as well. All of these don't require the regulations, which is another really helpful clarifying point, is that we're trying to streamline the understanding of the law. And if you can focus in on specific activities that you're undertaking, then it just helps you understand what is required. 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So within those key points of integration, you have this mandated support from WEEE management operators. And that's really to kind of justify the benefit that you're going to get from this extensive collection process that's being done at the informal level. So your responsibility as a WEEE management operator is to guide the verification and registration process of certain waste reclaimers. There are various databases. They don't really speak to one another. That's another thing that we really want to see happen with the policy, is that databases are connected and can help us understand the nature or the lay of the land a little bit better. So that requirement, assist if needed to get on one of those databases. Education with regards to handling of the product, and that is twofold: making sure there's no occupational health and hazards being experienced by these handlers, or and the second is product integrity, and that really just further bolsters this functionality requirement. We're really trying to make sure that WEEE is reused. And then for dismantling, the last one for collection is really about the provision of PPE, which includes glasses and gloves, without requiring waste pickers to actually pay a cost for that. So, and then when we go into a more technical space with the dismantling processes, this is really something that requires a little bit more clarity in terms of what can you and can you not dismantle to avoid any of those occupational health hazards. So there's no dismantling of CRT and FPD, flat panel display screens. Not allowed to, it's very clear. Temperature exchanger, so not allowed to dismantle. And then with manual dismantling, except for easier or casings that can be retracted, that's also clearly defined within the norms and standards, which we haven't had in the past. So the hope is that clearly defining that boundary, that point of interaction, that interface between formal operators and the informal sector, seeing what they can and cannot do, as well as ensuring that there is support provided where it's needed. That's really the hope with these two policies, the policy and the norms and standards speaking to one another. Thank you.
Last 30 seconds. So I just wanted to touch on a few of the other interventions. So obviously we've mentioned the policy and the norms and standards as two kind of key legislative documents that we're working on within South Africa, but we also are working on a few more kind of research-based practical documents. Aysha mentioned the WEEE curriculum, and that's going to be looking at, I think it's NQF 3 to 5. I would have to clarify. Our colleague Suzanne is driving that process, but that's going to be kind of a modular-based WEEE curriculum that'll get you up to becoming a WEEE entrepreneur. So that's quite a great instrument that we're developing. The Municipal WEEE Compass is a process that we're actually starting at the moment, which is going to assist. It's going to provide a toolkit for local government to understand national WEEE policy and norms and standards and how it relates to them. So an example is right now, electronic waste is banned from landfill in South Africa, but it is still going to landfill across the board. Municipalities do not know how to handle it. This document's going to help guide them in terms of understanding what to do locally from a bylaw perspective, how to improve municipal collection services, how to assist or work with producer responsibility organizations to create that environment. And we're doing a small scale facility framework, which will be mapping small scale e-waste recycling facilities that are both public sector and non-profit driven. And we're going to then develop a generic case for how a small scale business can start up in the e-waste recycling and dismantling space. And finally, linking the existing incentives that are in South Africa that speak to SMME and entrepreneur support and development and tie into the circular economy and green economy, and that link to the policy. So there's a document out there that if you want to start a small e-waste business, you have the norms and standards as a guideline, you know where you can get your incentives, and you have a framework for how to do it, and the municipality knows how to address it. So we're trying to tie it all together as well with some of these other research documents. That's us. Thank you.
No, thanks so much for that presentation. And I must say, e-waste does not get a lot of attention. I mean, from the presentation, it clearly seems to be an issue. As you've pointed out at the beginning, you often see, discarded parts of computer appliances just thrown to the side or burnt, and they can have very real consequences with some of the materials and the chemicals that are inside them. So thanks so much for that presentation, and we hope the work goes further and we can get the full sort of waste stream and value chain up and operational. Okay, so the final presentation, we're going to move into the final presentation of our session, and it's specifically looking at township SMMEs in the green economy, understanding barriers, growth, and job creation. So if we can just load the presentation while I introduce the speaker. Great. So presenting for us today on the township economy is Abigail. I hope I'm pronouncing your surname right. Khuluse? Abigail Khuluse. Abigail is a program manager at the National Business Initiative, NBI, serving in the Economic Inclusion Unit. Her role includes pioneering an initiative that seeks to facilitate job creation within the SMME sector with a very strong focus on the green economy, while also focusing on capacity building for skilling and upskilling unemployed youth to take up that employment. Abigail, over to you.
Unit. Thank you. Lulamile is coming from the environment unit, where he has been working a lot on the just transition implementation projects, and how do we start looking at integration or unlocking rather opportunities within the value chains, the green value chains for SMEs. So this became a very interesting piece of work for us to delve into as we try and unravel where are the bottlenecks in order for us to progress. I'm actually trying to do manually. So just quickly, at the high level, I'll just take you through a brief, the context and what our research question was. I'll touch on briefly on the background literature. We looked at our research methodology and then go into the discussion of the findings. I think the reason also why we're here, and it's been documented quite many times, the role that SMEs play and the key role that they play in the job creation space, and also driving inclusive growth within our country. So that's really been documented. What is a challenge and what is interesting, though, what one finds within the township sector is that whilst we have key economies that are operating within the township space, it is really a lot of SMEs in large numbers who tend to be informal and tend to face significant barriers that inhibit their growth. And as a result, you find that they're actually not employing as many or as well as they should be employing. This is further exacerbated by the current policy, the current industrial policy, which seems to have failed to actually address some of these limitations in addressing the capacity of the SMEs to actually grow. And so we have that as one side of the picture. And now we have the green economy on the other side and the promise of the green economy. So we're doing quite a lot of work in delving and getting to understand what are these opportunities, what do they look like, what jobs are sitting in the spaces. And on top of that, I mean, we can also see as a country, I think we have very focused attention. If you look at our Just Energy, the JET IP plan and all the work that's going on and the structures that have been put in place, there's a lot of intentionality that's going on in the space. So our research question really came to say, knowing these two areas, right? How can township SMEs leverage the green economy and take advantage of the potential opportunities to create jobs in the context of existing barriers? And this is informed by the literature that we looked at. And we looked at the literature in three different, call it themes, if you would. Mainly the township SMEs and job creation. And that literature, I think, is literature that we all very much familiar with in terms of, well, what was actually interesting was that there's been significant studies that have been done to get to understand the barriers and the challenges that township SMEs face. But the interesting thing was that these challenges are consistent, they're persistent over many, many years, over a long period of time. So all these studies are saying exactly the same thing over a significant period of time. And that then puts an interesting question to what, the extent to which we have progressed in addressing some of these barriers. But what was also interesting was a study by Erdogan, which said that, when we're looking at SMEs in particular, apologies, this was not on township SMEs, but general SMEs in particular, it's the job creation element is very much comes from the youngness of the organization than it does come from the size of the organization. Because if an organization or if that entity or that business or that enterprise, the younger the enterprise it is, the growth rates tend to be higher. And if the growth rates are higher, the demand for labor and skills becomes higher, and therefore they are likely to employ more. In this instance, we have township SMEs that are unable to grow and they are stifled, their growth is stifled, therefore their ability to create jobs is also then stifled. Looking at the green economy, the green entrepreneurship side, I think we acknowledge it's still very nascent and there's a lot of research that still needs to be done. But there's very little empirical evidence or empirical studies rather that have been conducted to date looking at township SMEs in particular and the green economy. However, was it Smith? Yeah, Smith and Musango did a study recently that they found that that's actually not 2015. I think it's a typo on my side. Apparently, I think it was sooner. They did a study and they found that there is some evidence, right, that links if you look at township economies and if you look at SMEs and the green economy, that has the ability to drive or the potential to drive inclusive growth. So that evidence is there. And that's what's also, I guess, encouraging the work that's happening in terms of what then are these opportunities and where are these opportunities that are happening. What is interesting is that the costs and the benefits are not quite clear as yet in terms of what is the quality and the quantity of those jobs and what they actually look like. Should we be able to achieve this inclusivity? And just lastly, on green industrialization, I think what became very apparent was that whatever policy frameworks are adopted, it's important that they are holistic and they're able to address different aspects or different dimensions within the green economy, within the green transition space. And these different aspects, meaning, consumption-centered dimensions at a factory level or firm level and the sustainability thereof, and also then the productions. So we cannot look at the only way, or not the only way, but we cannot look at driving green consumption without necessarily having the policy to stimulate green manufacturing as a practical example. The methodology that we looked at, this was very much, we were really, really interested in understanding the experiences of these SMEs. Creative research design, which was really about us getting into their journey and having an in-depth discussion around their experiences and building the theory, a grounded theory approach. We looked at 10 SMEs across different sectors within the green economy, and these are existing SMEs. So they are existing and they're currently operating. And we did an in-case analysis. We also looked at analyzing the cases across each other and trying to identify what are the key themes that are coming up and synthesizing that data and bringing it back in terms of what is it telling us in terms of what's currently happening and what are some of the interventions that we need to think about. So moving on to our findings, you know, whilst we did not set out to look at motivations or motivation to start as a key thing, it became important for us to understand it and to just, you know, get a view to where they are right now. And just to mention, in this instance, we focused on purely the founder or this, you know, the owner of the business. So we spoke to the owner. As we extend the study to expand it and speak to other people within the business. But in this instance, it was focused on the founder and trying to understand what got them into the business. And their motivations are very varied. But what was interesting is with all motivations, the key things or key themes that came across was knowledge became quite important. Knowledge was a big trigger in them converting from being an ordinary or traditional business to being a green business, or even exploring some of the green initiatives that they were exploring within their business. And this knowledge came through various forms. Some of it was traditional knowledge that they had learned from their grandparents or from history or traditional things that were done in the family that were just never seen commercial angle or from call it a commercialization angle, while others learned of this knowledge through incubators. And again, I think we'll see the role of incubation coming out strongly and its importance. And there were a number of these cases who, through their own research, had been just developed this interest, and that enabled them then to innovate and try out different ideas all on their own to then launch into the green economy space. We looked at how did they launch into the actual transition? What were the enabling factors that got them to actually launch? Technical mentorship and technical assistance came out very, very strongly. And it coming out strongly, it came from different aspects. So some received technical mentorship from an incubator, which, you know, they had come across, but we had one in particular who had been exhibiting as an example, and this SME had been exhibiting and met a tourist who said, "Hey, I see your business is doing this. I know an institution in Holland who can support you in doing this." And she actually wrote to them and approached them, and they sent through a technical mentor to provide that technical upskilling. And there was a case of one of the entrepreneurs who identified within the area that they were in, within the geographical location, which established businesses are doing what I would like to explore and are doing it well, and approach those businesses for that mentorship and for that support. So the cases indicated that whilst the role of technical assistance was quite important, the way in which they receive technical assistance is very varied. And I'll speak to that later. Secondly, the grant funding was a critical element. None of these SMEs, interestingly, were able to access formal financial systems or formal funding through formal systems. They were all, the initial start was through grant funding. And again, it emphasizes the critical role that grant funding has at the enabling role at startup with these innovations. Of course, the grant funding was not sufficient, was not necessarily sufficient for all the SMEs. And what you see, because there is that gap also in accessing formal financial markets, some have sold cars to actually get the business going. Some have had to run 2 jobs to get the business going and self-fund the business to where it is. And of course, then the non-financial support across the board, which spoke to issues of establishing a business, business modeling, and financial management, etc. When we looked at where is the business now? Now the business is established. So what's next for the business? We found that these businesses are actually unable to now move to the next stage of where they would like to be, their next stage of growth. And these are barriers we have termed growth suppressing factors. And the reason why we've termed them growth suppressing factors is because they have managed to start, they have created employment, but now they need to scale and move to the next level of their growth. But that has now been slowed down. And these three themes came out very strongly. Limited access to technology. So the SMEs that we engaged with, there was a good number of them who were able to solve for technology at startup level. So for the scale that they needed to prove their concept, to develop their product and actually get to market and sell the product, that technology was sufficient. But now when it has to scale, that technology is actually not sufficient. It cannot produce enough volumes. It cannot produce fast enough. It is pretty manual. So it takes much longer to produce. And the SMEs, if I quote directly, are saying, I'm having to decline orders because I cannot produce fast enough. And in one particular case, the SME has proved the concept, been selling, and now they want to access new markets, but the product quality is not at the right state because they actually designed and built the machinery themselves. So they now need more formalized machineries that will then get them to the right quality that they need. The second factor was limited access to finance. I think we've had a number of conversations on the limited access to finance. In this instance, whilst the technology component is also affected by the limited access to finance, meaning some are not getting the finance that they need to then purchase the technology that is required, there was also a very strong element on the working capital component. So statements like, I'm making money, but not enough money to be considered for finance became an issue. Again, statement like, I'm having to decline orders because I don't have enough money to buy raw materials for production. In fact, one SME said, I couldn't even get a mere overdraft of 5,000 Rand from my banker. And that was a huge disappointment for the SME, which indicates that there is a huge misunderstanding even in terms of how the bank understands how this business operates. So in her mind, she's making money, she can see the money, but because she needs to produce, the money gets used for production. So there's no way it's going to sit in the bank. And so they're talking, past each other. And then the last element was the limited access to market. And I think this one deserved quite a bit of delve in, because with all the cases studied, whilst access to market limited access to market was mentioned as a growth suppressing factor and a barrier, its characteristics were very, very different for almost each and every one of those cases. One is, for example, one is producing too far from where the market is. And because they don't have transport, they can't access the market. Whilst another has the market but cannot deliver because they don't have the technology that they require to actually deliver, or they cannot deliver to the quantities. In fact, one of the participants, or one of the SMEs engaged, had been part of an exhibition and had received a big order, or had an interest in a big order, and she's like, I actually do not meet the requirements to deliver on this order. So this is very 3 minutes. Wow. Okay. So this is very indicative. Wow. Okay. This is very, this is very indicative of the complexity and the dynamic interventions that are required to solve for the market access. I actually do have 3 more slides. So I am going to consolidate the discussion on the findings, and I think mention maybe what I have not already mentioned within the last 3 minutes. And that is knowledge of opportunities is not a barrier. However, there isn't enough knowledge, there isn't enough information, and that's the role of the ecosystem, where we see the ecosystem needing to play a critical role in that space. The barrier is on scaling, and the challenge is that these jobs have now been created, but these jobs are now at risk because these SMEs are unable to scale and unable to receive the support that they then need to scale. And what became very obvious is that the SMEs are exposed to township SMEs in general. Like I said earlier, we know what their challenges are. The green SMEs, however, have additional challenges that they need to now solve for. For example, like outdated skills. A lot of the skills that are required are new skills, and they have had to train up their own staff to do this work. So whilst it makes them more resilient, which is great, from a skilling perspective, because of the informal nature, those skills now are not easily recognizable. So if they are unable to maintain those jobs, then those jobs need to move elsewhere. If those skills are not recognized, it becomes an issue for the system as a whole. And I think lastly, it's worth mentioning the access to finance conversation, because whilst we know there's a shortage of green climate finance, that on the slide, whilst we know that we've got a shortage of green climate finance and we need to actually be getting more funds, it will not necessarily solve the issue that we currently have, that green SMEs cannot access funding, because there is still a ticket size issue that needs to be addressed. Ticket size, and we've seen this in practice from our experience, is that the ticket sizes that are there for green finance are still very much at a level that is not accessible for the SMEs, which again speaks to that missing middle component that needs a strong focus on. So in conclusion, sir, we really, as I mentioned, the study is going to continue, but what has been clear from the study is that the SMEs are township-based SMEs with knowledge, are able to innovate, and they're able to get into the space. And for these particular SMEs, the barriers to entry were reachable because they were able to solve for those barriers. Where the issues need to be solved is on scaling. And that is where we think the role of policy together with ecosystem players and ecosystem interventions is required. And that's also some of the work that we are putting a very strong magnifying lens on how do we actually build and support an ecosystem that is collaborative to address some of these issues. Thank you.
No, thanks so much, Abigail, for that presentation and for keeping very closely to your time. Great. So, I mean, I'd like to open up the floor if there's any questions for our panelists before we close our session. Any questions from our crowd? Okay, so I'm going to take the opportunity. You're going to have to listen to questions from me. Okay, so just very quickly for each of our presenters. So maybe starting first with so we've seen the just transition and the narrative, the concepts, etc., being quite laid out in South Africa. We've got the framework that was mentioned, but now we need to really grapple with the nuts and bolts of things. Is how do we level, right? And we see this manifesting in many value chains. Recently, we were doing work on green hydrogen, for example. You know, there's definitely a mismatch between what we envision at the concept level and how things actually unfold, given the constraints that firms face actually on the ground. So given that, do you, in your opinion, is the development of small businesses getting sufficient attention in this whole just transition narrative or not? That would be my question, if you can just keep note of that. Second question for Aysha, and sure, why is your name is just disappearing from my, yeah, your name is right here. Yeah, there you go. Paul, I should get that name. For Paul and Aysha is, so, you know, you've laid out very nicely what the issues are, where the focus needs to be. Do we have a sense of the key producers of this waste? So where's the waste emanating from? So where we need to focus our efforts? Is it the lay consumer who's discarding their old laptop, or is it, you know, much more, is it happening on a much more larger scale at an industrial level? and how do we specifically target in policy? And the last question for Abigail, when you were concluding your presentation, something you said really stuck with me. When we were doing research around green startups and adaptation, this is one thing that came up a lot as well, is about understanding the business model and where that small business is oriented. It's a small business, but entering a low carbon green type of activity. Sometimes these markets are new, untested. So it needs to be a bit of an appreciation for the type of business model. Maybe in your first year, you're not profitable, but from year 2, year 3, so there needs to be some sort of acknowledgement for the type of process you're in. Where do you, I mean, you already said, so where can financial institutions improve around this in just better addressing the needs of some of these startups? So we'll start here.
You're standing, so I'll take a stand. I think, Muhammed, it's a very important question, but I would like to propose that we look at it from two perspectives. So maybe from a policy perspective and then a programmatic perspective. So it's important, we do not have a lot of SMME policies. We've got the master plan, we've got the SMME and cooperative finance policy, which is a bit silent on green. I believe it's time for a just transition SMME inclusion policy. And Michael, our work, I believe definitely the work from NBI is good foundations to start initiating a dedicated policy that will then give the levers to have the financial incentive. But I also believe from a programmatic perspective, a lot of the master plans in the industries, if we're looking at hydrogen, water and sanitation, the plastics, I mean, we've got everything, even the textiles, industry and footwear and leather. Every industry, every sector has amount of waste, water and energy. So I believe we need to be a lot more clear in the master plans. Where is the role and the opportunity for the SMME in the value chains? A lot more visibility, because we as researchers, we had to go scratch. We went through SAREM, we went through so many master plans, going to try and look, is there a section in the master plan specifically talking about the SMMEs at different life cycles? Where can we look at enterprise and supply development programs within that value chain? So I think if we are struggling with that, the SMME might really be struggling with the visibility. And where do I fit in within this value chain? I'm trying to understand the master plan. So a bit more focus there. It could be even maybe from the implementation team at the master plans, that they issue a separate draft for SMME opportunities, almost advertising it, almost like saying to entrepreneurs, this is where we see is a good fit. So from a programmatic perspective, and I believe then if the SMME just transition policy is in place, it could really be the glue for the ecosystem to come together and very clear roles and responsibilities. Tomorrow, Michael and I have a full morning workshop. Sorry, we already fully our numbers are full capacity, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to bring the sector decision makers together. We've got DMRE there, DTIC, Water Research Commission, NCPC, CSIR, we've got the Department of Small Business and DFFE, everybody there tomorrow, and National Treasury as well, to sit around the tables and then look at the barriers in more detail, but then come up with some very concrete recommendations. And we would like to have an outcome. Our dream tomorrow is to have a task team that will put their hands up to say, let's take this further. Let's set up a SMME Just Transition task team, and we're going to push this agenda forward. Thank you, Michael. Muhammed. Sorry.
No, thanks. I'll rename myself. It's okay. We're all having issues with names. Okay.
Yeah, so I think there's the kind of main sectors which are generators of e-waste are essentially households, in government and institutions, and business. Obviously, business is pretty well served at the moment, at least when you start looking at bigger businesses, retail centers, etc. Waste management companies often, service these facilities, and that's essentially dealt with by the larger recyclers. Institutions, when it comes to government, I think one of the main challenges that we've noticed that I think everyone's aware of is that government actually has asset release program policy restrictions. So supply chain management makes it very difficult to release electronic waste or anything that used to have a value of if a laptop dies, if it hasn't kind of reached the end of its lifespan on the books, it's got to be kept in a storeroom until, and often we're finding that these storerooms full of old electronics are getting stripped by people in the institution. So there is a major challenge around government releasing these releasing e-waste. But from a household perspective, I think it comes down to, like everyone in this room, it's about creating awareness and being more aware of the fact that when something dies, you can actually try and repair it before you throw it away. And if you want to throw it away, do it responsibly through the collection mechanisms that are popping up. So PROs in this country are really driving collection. Have a look at We Are South Africa, or We Are SA, the new website that we've released, which has information on collection points across the country, drop-off sites. So households have a big role to play, but business as well, and especially government institutions.
So I have a slightly different perspective on the true generators of e-waste, and it is those that generate, they manufacture, they produce the e-waste. So the producer, like Dell, they are actually, this is Dell right in front of us. Thank you for helping us present. But they are the producers of this waste. So we have EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility regulations that are mandatory. And in that, you have a clear definition of what a producer is. And I'll just highlight two key people that I think I want to just mention. One is the importer of e-waste. Not the importer of e-waste, that's illegal, but if you're importing trash that's going to become waste in 3 months or 3 years, we can debate that. But the point being is that importers need to take responsibility and understand the gravity of the waste that they are placing on the market if they're not managing that waste. So the same can be said, for example, with solar panels. You have two different types. You have this thin film that you can import, but we don't know how to manage it. So it's just going to become trash in 20 years' time, or even the life cycle of that is debatable as well. So it's really about a full life cycle perspective on the product that we have. So it's not necessarily the individual's fault that their phone is irreparable. It's actually a design issue that needs to be addressed. It's an international issue that needs to be addressed. So playing the role as South Africa is around the negotiation table, saying that we have a big market, it's coming up. There we have PMGs that can be used in manufacturing from an electronics sector development point. We bring that power around the table and we say we need EPR at an international level. We need design standards that allow repairability and open up this ability to share specs or, full repair. Because if you just have glue on glue on glue and you can't remove your battery, it's very difficult for individuals to manage that waste. So if you want us to manage it, you have to make it accessible. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, Muhammed, thanks for your question. And I think it's one that's a very, very important question. We have to acknowledge, though, that even without talking about green finance or finance for green SMEs, is that current financial institutions, unfortunately, just in the way they are built and in the credit rating systems, they are built for, for different purposes and don't fully cater for the SME segment. So already we have that gap. And those who've been following the conversation, that globally the conversation about how to actually provide proper credit rating systems for SMEs has been a big gap, just, globally. And we've seen the emergence of alternative funders coming up and occupying some of those spaces. And even within our space, those alternative funders are taking a lot more, occupying a lot more space there. So I think from a green perspective, we actually might see a similar trends. I know there are some formal finance institutions who are starting to do some work, but at a very small scale and trying to see what they can test out. In fact, one particular one eventually closed down, but they did the actual first green transaction in South Africa a couple of years ago, and unfortunately they've closed down for various other reasons. So I think they are doing work and they're trying to do work, but just by the nature of how they are built and their systems and their processes, we might find that alternative funders and other different types of solutions might come up. And then the formal financial institutions will possibly might still play a role, but it might be a different role. I don't know if my colleague Lulamila wants to add.
Thanks, Abigail. Yeah, the only thing I would add, I think just from like DFIs and financiers, that South Africa has a an obligation and a commitment towards achieving our net zero. So I think for financiers as well, I think them actually designing products that can actually cater for some of these SMMEs actually helps us then transition towards that net zero. So the JIP that we agreed to basically comes with some of these conditions. So financiers can definitely play a role in that regard. Yeah. Thanks.
No, so let's just give one last round of applause for all of our presenters. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I must apologize, we are over time. But if you want, just take a 5-minute comfort break, grab a cup of coffee and a muffin or whatever you want, and we'll be back here for the last 2 remaining presentations for the day. Thanks so much for joining us. Okay, thanks, colleagues. So we're going to be heading into our last session for the day, and we have 2 inputs from our colleagues. The first input is going to relate to, well, the title is Empowering the Greenpreneur, Promoting Green Industrialization Amongst Small Businesses in the Construction Sector. So a nice dive into some of the dynamics around sustainability in the construction sector. And that's going to be followed by a presentation on the oceans economy, specifically promoting increased small, medium, and micro enterprise participation in the oceans economy. We know that the oceans economy increasingly over the past couple of years has been getting a lot of attention, particularly for the potential for its contribution towards a transition towards a lower carbon world. So I'm going to introduce our speakers first, as we've done in the previous sessions, and then I'll hand over to our speakers to carry on with their presentations. I'm really sorry, colleagues. It seems like somehow the bios got mixed up in here. So what I am going to do in a pinch, because we need to be flexible, is let you introduce yourselves. So just give us a very brief introduction. Yeah, sure. Let's start with the ladies. Ladies first. So just give us a very brief introduction, your name, where you're from, a little bit of your background, and then we'll take it from there. And I do apologize for that.
Afternoon, everyone. We're almost at the end. My name is Nokwanda Motsitsi. I am a researcher from an organization called Property Point. And some of my research interests include feminist development theory, entrepreneurship, and I'm also currently pursuing a master's in development studies at WITS.
Hi, my name is Nozipho Ziqubu, also coming from Property Point. I'm currently pursuing my degree in master's degree in applied economics at UCT, and my research interests are the implementation and the adaptation of ESG, as well as the implementation of the AFCFTA. So yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was given by my parents the name of Lwandile, and my ancestral lineage is aligned to the Socigwa clan. So I'm Lwandile ka Socigwa, the founder of Socigwa Management, who in my workplace, they also call me its managing director. I'm here today to present a paper on research work that we've done for the South African International Maritime Institute, which focuses on opportunities for small, micro, medium enterprises in the oceans economy, work that we've done for them as commissioned by them. So I'll be talking to that, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
No, great. Thank you so much, colleagues, for introducing yourselves. So we'll begin with the presentation on the construction sector. I don't know, would you like to control the slides yourself? Maybe? Okay. So you just need to hit the right button and just kind of point it at that laptop over there. Okay. And if you're having any issues, just give me a shout and...
All right. Hi, everyone. So today we'll be presenting our research titled promoting green industrialization among small businesses in the construction sector. And this was really inspired by the program that we recently launched at Property Point, the Greenpreneur program, where we find that the majority of the entrepreneurs on the cohort do not really feature in the beginning stages of the green construction value chain. And so we sought out just to try and find ways to integrate them into being manufacturers and producers of green products. So just a brief outline. We will provide just the background, just to paint the picture of what it really inspired this paper. Then we'll go into the research objectives, the methodology, and just our key findings, recommendations, and some closing remarks. Sorry. Yes. So as we know, South Africa has really been going through a process of deindustrialization, which limits its ability to drive economic growth. So essentially what it means is that over the time, and what was also mentioned in the plenary session, we've seen a decline in industrial activities, particularly in manufacturing. And the decline is quite significant because we know that industrialization is a major engine of economic growth, really providing jobs and fostering technological innovation. And so we find that even though we may have a substantial industrial base, it isn't diversified enough, and many industries are not competitive on a global scale. And just to highlight some of this, on a occasion of the a launch of a book, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana mentioned that manufacturing's contribution to GDP has dropped significantly from around 22% in the late 1980s to about 12% currently. And also just some statistics from Stats SA highlight that the manufacturing industry lost about 308,845 jobs between 2005 and 2021. And so it really just highlights the socioeconomic impact of the deindustrialization that we're currently going through, contributing to higher unemployment rates and really greater economic inequality. Further, we have financial constraints which really make it difficult for local industries, for SMMEs to innovate and to expand, while international competition also puts a lot of pressure on local businesses, often leading to closures and job losses. So while these challenges really underscore the decline in South Africa's manufacturing sector, we find that the construction sector emerges as a key role player in building resilient infrastructure, really promoting inclusive and sustainable industrialization. And so just different legislative instruments such as the National Infrastructure Plan and the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan really highlight the sector's importance in transforming the economic landscape and boosting local demand post-COVID-19. We also have SMME-focused we also have SMME-focused localization policies, which mentioned by the speakers before. We're not really sure how far implementation goes, but the instruments are there to really foster SMME growth within the economy. But as we know, the construction sector is facing quite a bit of sustainability challenges, and the sector's potential is complicated by the deepening climate crisis, which necessitates the need towards sustainable practices. So to reduce carbon emissions really just adds another layer of complexity to really revitalize the industrial sector. So this next slide will just show a few can you see? Yes, statistics where we show that the greening of the construction industry is complicated by the fact that there's extensive energy usage throughout all stages of the value chain. 37% global gas emission is from the construction industry. We have top right corner where total greenhouse gas in Africa is 3.8%, and the steel and cement industry accounts for 38% of that. And when we bring it back home in South Africa, the sector is reliable for 7% of direct greenhouse gas emissions, and 95% of those are from building operations. So we find that this really creates an opportunity amongst the challenge of SMMEs to, enter the space. So we find that the role of the small and of the SMME really becomes increasingly crucial. Past policies, as we've been mentioning throughout the day, have fallen short in supporting SMMEs, but we know that they really play a vital role as suppliers, as manufacturers, as service providers, as job creators within the space, and they really are just the backbone of the economy. So we see the case where the demand for sustainable solutions in the construction sector really presents a significant opportunity for SMMEs to engage in this burgeoning green economy. And by integrating what we really are advocating for is that by integrating them into the green construction value chain, SMMEs can not only grow their businesses, but also contribute to a broader environmental goals. So it's at this juncture that we sought ways to achieve SMME integration in the green construction value chain. And this involved just identifying different strategies that can help small businesses become key players in producing and in supplying green construction materials and services, and to also determine factors that are hindering the participation and to counteract that with necessary interventions to address these challenges. So it is here that I will just hand over to my colleague to take us through the remaining parts of it.
Thank you, Nokwanda. So the methodology that we used was a mixed method approach. Firstly, we did review research with literature review on SMME participation in the green construction material production, as well as reviewed some policy documents that just to gauge the challenges and also the initiatives that are there for SMMEs in this green space. So in total, we interviewed 7 entrepreneurs in our Greenpreneur program, and we call them Greenpreneurs because they are in the green sector and in the solar installation and maintenance. So 6 of them are in our cohorts in the program, and 1 is an external manufacturer, but not in green manufacturing. And we conducted interviews focusing also on the challenges and barriers faced by SMMEs in the green construction value chain, just to gather insights for evidence-based recommendations to enhance SMME participation and manufacturing green construction. So we applied the Socioeconomic Impact Assessment Systems, which is also known as the SAIS methodology. So our key findings, move to the slide, yes. So our key findings, we identified 4 themes, but firstly, before we dive into that, we did gauge that our SMMEs are aware of where the construction sector is heading. They are aware of that they are advanced in green construction materials and what other countries are doing. And they've done this through research, talking to their clients, and also through experience. So the first barrier that's hindering greenpreneurs in entering the manufacturing of green construction materials is the cost of manufacturing these materials, which is a major barrier for greenpreneurs to infiltrate this sector. And all the interviewed entrepreneurs, they've indicated that they do not have the necessary funds to buy machinery and equipment. And hence, we mostly rely on importing these materials, mostly from China. So just a direct quote from one of our entrepreneurs, and they mentioned that through their research, they've discovered that in Australia, they're already producing and trialing concrete production with a reduced ratio of clicker. So she feels like in South Africa, we always wait for advanced economies to give us approval before we try our own things and also try to implement. So there's always that we need to wait for advanced or European countries to implement certain policies, then we apply them ourselves. The second barrier is the lack of government support and policy that creates an enabling environment for greenpreneurs to infiltrate the sector. Greenpreneurs and also highlighted that the government policy usually doesn't filter through through to municipality levels, in which you know that they do have a direct relationship with small businesses through tendering and all the services that they provide for them. And they mentioned that the policies are there, but they do not filter down to the regional level and even the municipalities. And one of them even mentioned that in Cape Town, the city of Cape Town is probably one of the few areas that are taking renewable energy seriously, which should be done in Gauteng as the region that generates a lot of capital for the country. The third barrier is the lack of information and advocacy. Even though entrepreneurs or greenpreneurs rather are able to conduct their own research, but information needs to be forthcoming. And also when information is forthcoming, it creates advocacy and also market demand. So if there's no information and there's no market demand, it's hard for them to even present a new product to the market because no one is aware of that product in the market. So one of the entrepreneurs mentioned that he only became aware of the electric charging points when he went to China. He was not aware of it, and because it hasn't been spoken about in South Africa, as well as the battery storage systems that they were being constructed in China. And he did bring that concept in Gauteng. However, no one bought into it. So he was disappointed to find out that they're building now they're building battery storage in Bloemfontein. It is not part of that. The last one was the lack of private and public collaboration in the construction sector, especially in the private sector. We've noticed that everyone wants to be the first one that does this so that they appear as a person that was the first implementer. And also the public sector also needs to collaborate with the private sector so there's an alignment between the public and private sector regarding the green transformation, which delays the adaptation and implementation. They also emphasize that they see the need for collaboration amongst themselves because to build capacity, financial and skills capacity to go into the manufacturing sector of construction material is not something that you can do alone. So there is a growing concern with South Africa because we are the first country to adopt just transition in Africa. However, the adaptation and the implementation of this policy has been very stagnant, and we are lagging behind a lot of emerging and emerged economies. If you look at the research that is being done in Kenya, there's a lot of research that's done in improving green construction. However, here there's lack of information, and there's no research that focuses on the construction materials. More focus is put on solar installation and okay, there's a word that I'm looking for, and maintenance. Thank you. So the Global Alliance for Building Construction published a report in 2023 that gives emerging economy strategies on how to fast track the implementation of producing green materials in the construction sector. And due to time, I won't go into each and every one of them, but the first one is to improve and increase access to reliable and transparent data so that SMMEs are aware of the problems that they are trying to solve and also be able to identify the gaps in the market, and also increase the inclusion and ensure fairness in certification and labeling standards. We've seen this problem in advanced economies where large corporations are being prioritized when it comes to licensing for green buildings. So we need to also make sure that there's fairness, and we also license the little guys who take who are very important in bringing innovative ideas. Number 3 is enforce performance-based building codes, empower cities. I know GBCSA is busy with enforcing performance-based building codes currently, and also empowering cities and municipalities, as they've mentioned earlier, that they do have a close relationship with municipalities, so they do need to be part of decarbonization of material, which advocates for SMMEs to be in the initial stage of the construction value chain, and also tackle gender bias in both formal and informal building sectors. So you're probably wondering, as an SMME, where would you start when you'd want to infiltrate the sector? So the low-hanging fruits is firstly the decarbonization of non-renewable materials. These are the 4 most used materials in construction, such as cement, steel, aluminium, and glass. As I've mentioned that in Australia, they've already tried, they're trialing the decreasing the ratio, the clicker ratio and cement ratio when producing concrete. Also with the steel, trying to move away from using a traditional method and using renewable energies in the production process of these four materials. And also you can move, then you gradually move to renewable materials such as bamboo, timber. I know that WeWork is busy with building something in Cape Town or a workspace in Cape Town, which they're going to apply more bamboo and timber and wood, biomass and living materials. And the last one is the earth-based masonry, which most people find it not aesthetically pleasing, but with more innovation and funding, you can make it aesthetically pleasing and also improve the durability. The Egyptian pyramids are still standing and they were made from that. So there's no need to question it. So moving on to the recommendations. Sorry, we're almost done. So the first recommendation as Property Point is to have financial incentives and support. This came from the research and the recommendations from the SMMEs to establish financial programs that help SMMEs to infiltrate the sector and being able to buy the machinery and the equipment that is required to be in the production stage. And also I know the banks or financial institutions are going to hate me about this, providing low interest rate loans that are tailor-made for greenpreneurs in this sector. And this also emphasizes the need for green financing and funding, which is also good for your ESG reporting if you're a financier. The second one is regulation and policy, which creates an enabling and conducive environment for SMMEs, simplifying the regulation, also reducing the red tape, and also protecting small businesses from large international corporations, even because they can't compete with them in the manufacturing sector. Then the third one would be market access and procurement policies that promote small businesses' participation. For instance, the recently assented Public Procurement Act 28 of 2024, which provides an opportunity to integrate the mandate procurement of green construction materials and also advocating for the inclusion of small businesses. Then the third one, so the fourth one is enterprise development. At PPVC, or Property Point rather, we pride ourselves that we advocate for inclusive program. We advocate for inclusive economic growth and development. And we always make sure that our SMMEs are included when it comes to economic growth. For example, the Greenpreneur program that we have that equips our SMMEs with the technical skills that are required for them to do solar installation and maintenance. The fifth one is awareness and advocacy. Like I've mentioned, if there's awareness and advocacy, you are able to create markets and create demand in the sector. And also educating both the public and the private sector, more especially the policymakers. And also in informing so that they can enforce performance-based building standards. We can create demand for these green products so that when an SMME comes and presents their innovative idea, it's easier for them to adapt. Okay, and then the last one would be infrastructure development, which development that is dedicated to industrial zones for green manufacturing products. So we do have an entrepreneurship hub in Kagiso, where we are helping entrepreneurs in the electric space, where they have access to resources, manufacturing, and testing centers. So that should be done for the construction sector as well, where they have access to the manufacturing equipment and they are able to conduct their research and test their products. So we will end our presentation with a video that explains the work that we do at Property Point and also the program that we currently have with our greenpreneurs.
South Africa. We are at the dawn of a new era, where whispers of change are morphing into cries for transformation. Because the future begs for sustainability and a focus on the environment. And at Property Point, we've listened. It's no secret that we've always believed in the transformative power of SMMEs. The ripples they create for themselves and their communities are a testament to that. And now, we are shifting gears and recommitting ourselves to unlocking the potential, not just of businesses in the property sector, but ones with the focus on what it means to be truly green. Last year, Property Point sponsored the SMME Village at the Green Building Convention, a space where 15 bold businesses redefined what it means to be sustainable and conscious of the environment, and this year we're doing the same. The success stories write themselves.
My name is Dorcas Malefetsi, the Managing Director for Hattingh Holdings. We specialize in landscaping and mining rehab. What Property Point has helped us in to focus on energy renewable. It was a very good initiative by Property Point to say, guys, think out of the box. Don't do the old-fashioned ways. Think, what can we do new that can be able to sustain, the economy, not only our businesses, but the economy as large.
My name is Kurisan Mashela. I'm the COO of NTC Group, and our collaboration and partnership with Property Point has enabled us to have access to a network of SMMEs like ourselves, where we empower them in terms of ESG and sustainability in order to prepare them to be investor ready, to access funding, to be able to develop projects sustainably, and to ensure that their businesses are future ready.
Okay, my name is Eddie Bukobodi. The company is called Sakisa Energy and Technology Group, and we offer solar PV solutions to homes and businesses. Property Point has helped shape our business to become more marketable, more relatable, and has also put us in a position to grow in the emerging sustainability space.
My name is Moses Mutaung from Abigail Engineering Solutions. With Property Point, we're trying to make the buildings green. So we're looking at targeting energy efficiency, water efficiency, and waste.
And these weren't just businesses, they were the architects of change, positioning Black-owned businesses at the forefront of green sustainability. We at Property Point are devoted to amplifying awareness around the green economy, introducing entrepreneurs to key players, providing valuable tools to ensure sustainability, and navigating them through certifications. Because green-focused businesses aren't just ticking boxes, they're setting the stage for financial triumph. Certifications, accreditations, partnerships with the Green Building Council of South Africa. They're the armor of success. And now we're taking the next stride. Property Point is launching a trailblazing program, an incubator supporting entrepreneurs in the green ecosystem. It's not just about numbers, it's about the impact we make on the social, environmental, and governance fronts. It's about the responsibility we have to everything and everyone around us. And so the cry for help has turned into a victorious roar. A roar towards a green, sustainable future, co-crafted with entrepreneurs who dream of making waves. This is only the beginning, a flashpoint of the revolution, the start to a future where small businesses are blazing beacons of sustainability and testaments to the power of green innovation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Am I audible? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll try. I'm not used to this sitting down, and part of no, it's okay. I'll do as the Romans do. That's what they say. Well, thank you so much, moderator. As I said, that we're presenting the paper on behalf of SAIMI. I'm not going to dwell much on the first two parts on the SAIMI's background and its role. I think I would rather go straight to the core of why we're here, which is look at the methodology and approach, and then be able to reflect on the work that we actually did, and then reflect on recommendations in the interest of time. But maybe as I do that, I think it's important to probably also provide a bit of a background that this is a study that was informed of SAIMI's intention to be able to provide knowledge around opportunities for small, micro, medium enterprises within the oceans economy. You will have an appreciation that for that to happen, one needed to actually first map out the entire value chain of the respective subsectors of the oceans economy, more especially because this is not something that had been done before. notwithstanding several studies and research work that has been done over the past 15 to 20 years on the oceans economy in the different subsectors. And also above that, we then had to locate ourselves within a particular common definition of who we refer to when we speak of an SMME. I think it was important. And as we did that, we also had to be able to then borrow from NESIA Act, which actually gives these respective categories of who we are talking about in terms of SMMEs. Over and above that, though, I think it's important that we also understand and have a common understanding in the room about what we mean by ocean economy. That if we're speaking about any activity that you are able to derive or any activity that is able to produce value towards contributing economically, and you are using the coastal lines and the water, then you are able then to be able to say that you belong within the oceans economy. Now, in the work that we did, we then looked at the various subsectors, and the subsectors that we looked at really come from the earlier studies that have been done through Operation Pagisa, and later on the Oceans Economy Master Plan, which is still been in draft and has not yet been finalized. So you would see that those of you that only understand Operation Pagisa as the one that drives the oceans economy, you'll see that the subsectors have grown quite significantly from where we started previously. Having said that, then we had to then, I've already mentioned that we had to map out the oceans economy value chain subsectors. Other key aspects that we needed to look at is what are some of the ways that SMMEs could participate in the sector or the subsectors of the oceans economy, and to what extent or level of participation can they be able to participate, and how do we respond with an implementation plan that supports a strategy for SMME participation in the oceans economy. And as I've said already, because of several studies that has been done before, we largely relied on secondary data, but obviously we then did on our side, were able to engage using qualitative methods with a number of stakeholders in and around the sector. Now, what we've been able to reflect on is that we've moved from what would have been about 4 or 5 subsectors of the oceans economy to about 13, with marine manufacturing, marine transport, aquaculture, renewable energy, offshore oil and gas. And then you've also got your transversal subsectors, for example, skills development and capacity building, research, innovation, and technology. And then you've also got marine protection and oceans governance. And then other subsectors would include coastal and marine tourism, renewable energy, communication, among others, which is also transversal, and also desalination. So we would be able then to reflect in terms of those subsectors, having to look at the first subsector of the oceans economy. This is in no particular priority of importance because they are all important. Marine manufacturing and repairs. So in this regard, we identify that your general activities would include your naval engineering, boat and shipbuilding, manufacturing. Those would be your core and primary activities that would happen. But you also have some support activities that would happen within this ecosystem, such as your marketing and sales, your financial services, being able to finance those that are requiring financing, your logistics, delivery, your sales and after sales support, and then also obviously disposal. Now, having not to go into detail, I'd rather want to focus on the next slide, colleagues, because we want to talk about opportunities. So now, having understood the value chain of this subsector, it becomes important that among other activities that are done to create these opportunities is that you need to have a system or environment in the country that actually supports SMMEs in boat building and marine components, among others, that are emerging and supporting manufacturing activities. And also, again, you would need to then, for instance, as an example, which we've come up with here to say that utilizing or making use of small, micro, medium enterprises for development or production of experimental prototypes, and also obviously new offshore structures, and be able to give them opportunities to gain the requisite exposure and experience with using of these different technologies that are actually available. Again, looking at possibilities of including these SMMEs in both manufacturing and supply, particularly of smaller products within the value chain and your consumables that currently you see them being actually still being produced by your conglomerates and your multinationals. Again, being able to have an online directory repository that allows for us to be able to tap into what type of skill sets and expertise exist in the sector across the value chain for small, micro, medium enterprises. And really, again, being able to impress on local content and actually being able to ensure that there's localization on some of the projects that are done, which are of a macro in size. Moving on to the next subsector, which is marine transport. You will recall previously marine transport and manufacturing would have been one, but now understanding the importance of marine transport on its own, it becomes a standalone subsector within the oceans economy, where you've got your port operations driving your primary activities such as cargo terminal operations, passenger terminal operations. And then again, on the other side, you can see that there's a whole lot of support services that are coming in ship agencies that are facilitating the work that is done and supporting the work that is done by the respective shipping entities. You've got your passenger ships on the primary, passenger transport, baggage collection, etc. So there's quite a big, this is a very big subsector, and therefore the opportunities again here would be able to be as enormous as the size of the subsector itself. Apologies for that. While we have an appreciation that this is a very capital intensive subsector, its nature, it becomes important that we still are able to have an appreciation of some of the areas that SMMEs could easily be able to access and participate. For instance, ship agencies, brokerages, these are activities which are in support of the primary, which are not actually requiring a lot of capital investment as a start. Your warehousing, yes, there may be some argument around that, but there's still an opportunity because within the warehouse value chain itself, there's a number of other activities that would happen in and around the port, labor services, supply chain, and also other commodities that are sold within the subsector itself. Off port or offshore, out of port limits launches, which would include, for example, hospitality, transport, supplying of perishable and consumable goods that could easily be locally manufactured, where there are platforms that are provided and supporting these SMMEs, including lubrication oil services of custom agents, warehousing, and also booking of local and international activities as well. Then we go on to the aquaculture subsector. Again, here there are opportunities that we want to reflect around aquaculture. It is again another subsector that is quite capital intensive in nature, notwithstanding there are some opportunities that we could be able to reflect on. For example, possible areas of entry and participation by SMMEs on the processing side. You saw there's the farming side of aquaculture, but then there's the processing side of aquaculture. Veterinary of the actual your tilapia and fish and all of that, tanker operations and plumbing services, electrical service. So you would see that these are some of the enabling activities of the actual ecosystem that you would see in the aquaculture. And we've been able to also see that the opportunities that have been created through the establishment of the Aquaculture Development Fund, which we've seen being able to establish through that some aquaculture development zones in respective certain SEZs in Saldanha. Kucha is one that is being set up. There's also one in Amatikulu in the KZN. So this would also be something that would say that there is an opportunity if there is initiatives or funding instruments that are actually geared to support some of the services that we've reflected here, business services as well, manufacturing, again, there is an opportunity there. Moving to the fisheries value chain. Now, part of the experiences in terms of fishing that you'd see a majority of small, micro, medium enterprises that want to enter the fisheries value chain, people are looking at fishing licenses. But there's a whole lot more within the subsector itself that one could be able to actually participate in. If you look at some of the primary activities that we've listed, and even those that are supporting, there are opportunities, but the whole mindset that we have is that for us to be able to participate in the fisheries value chain, we must be all fishermen. Now, now looking at some of these, for example, processing is another opportunity. Storaging, you've got to actually get the fish somewhere. It has to be stored somewhere. Transportation, net making, even net making maintenance, transportation again, and marketing. Others would include, among others, you being able to maintain the boats that the fishermen use to actually go out, because we understand, over and above the fact that there's a backlog in issuing of licenses, the industry itself is becoming saturated to a larger degree in terms of being able to issue the licenses that are required for actually fishing in certain areas. Now, moving on to the next subsector, which is the offshore oil and gas, part of the oceans economy, you would be able to see, we've been able to break it down into two, the oil value chain and also the LNG value chain, where from a primary point of view, looking at explorations and production, while on the LNG, it would include also processing, exploration, development, production, and processing. Now, this is another capital-intensive sector, which, for instance, when it comes to explorations and also licensing to be able to create offshore oil wells and so forth, the one would assume or perhaps would not associate with opportunities for small, micro, medium enterprises. What our study is showing is that there are a number of interventions that could actually be able to be introduced to create these opportunities. For example, where you have your large oil and gas companies who really can be able to be committed to supporting SMMEs. We know what the mining sector has been doing in as far as incentives of being able to create opportunities through these large mining operation and companies for the small ones to come in. There is an opportunity again at a policy level to intervene as government. Joint ventures and partnerships could be another opportunity, because when you are able to actually consolidate and combine these efforts, the capability and the de-risking part, because some of these small micro medium enterprises are actually are run by individuals. But when you are actually bringing in collaborations and these types of joint ventures, there's a bit more credibility that you can be able to create. Now, some of the other areas of intervention could be around local content requirements, which again, I think I've spoken about that in as far as incentives. But then SMMEs could also be able to participate in exploration or perhaps getting exploration rights, because at this point in time in this sector, the only people that are participating in actual explorations in the country, it's all the big multinationals. Whereas SMMEs could be able to be backed and supported to actually start to participate in explorations, because should those explorations yield to something that would actually allow for economic activity to proceed, then they could be part of the value chain, and they are actually contributors to actually being able to define their own destiny going forward. From a coastal marine tourism, I think the tourism value chain is the same across. It's no different and unique when it comes to the oceans economy, notwithstanding that some of the activities though would not be applicable, because not all work that is done there is done along the coast. Now, some of the opportunities that we see here for these SMMEs, these are quick wins, colleagues, particularly around boat touring, sightseeing, route motor and sailing boats, offshore restaurants, merchandising. These are some of the areas that we see from the study that SMMEs could be able to participate. Development of mobile applications that are used by or could be used by tour operators to be able to increase the success of corporate travels and actually give that level of confidence, because then they are able to interact with these international tourists and even local tourists even before they get there. While at this point in time, you are only relying on the big travel agents to be able to facilitate that. From an oceans, this one is largely a government driven, because it's about regulations, which is marine protection and ocean governance, about regulations. It's about being able to comply with the international standards and all of that. So largely government would be able to really drive this. While it is the case though, we've been able to pick up some of the opportunities again that exist for SMMEs when it comes to marine protection and ocean governance. For example, some of the ones that I would want to talk to here is around being able to be key supporters of providing credible data that is required. Again, providing, supporting consulting services that would assist in providing and monitoring the development and resolve areas of conflicting interest, which would be presented by the relevant domains and the respective domains within the oceans economy, and also resolving some of the societal issues that exist within the oceans economy that give it a problem for work to be done. For example, just thinking of the bad 3 minutes, yeah. If you think about the delays that are happening in the Eastern Cape of being able to do the water testing that is supposed to be done for the mining activities in Olobin, because of some of these societal issues, when you've got SMMEs that could be able to come in and participate in resolving. Small harbor and coastal development, these are some of the key primary and secondary activities. I want to go now. I'm worried about time. I want to get to the last. Apologies. Okay, so we're left with 2 slides. No, at least we're safe. Small harbor and coastal development, capacity building programs are important. You will recall that people who are actually majority of the SMMEs in the small harbors, your Port St. John's, for example, these are people who are largely coming from the informal sector, who are actually participating in the space, who would need to be supported. Incubation and accelerator programs in and around the space is an opportunity to be able to use to support these SMMEs, and obviously regulatory compliance and support. Largely, it's around being able to enable these SMMEs to participate in the space. Lastly, as a closing slide on our side, is what are some of the key outcomes of this in terms of recommendations overall? Stakeholder coordination becomes key and pivotal, because ultimately you need all of these different stakeholders from government, industry, sometimes even the higher education institutions to be coordinated. Creating of greater public awareness about the oceans economy, there's an opportunity to really intensify there. And then the rest, I think we've been able to reflect on them in the respective recommendations, because all of it speaks about inclusion on marine manufacturing, expansion of SMME in the coastal marine, utilization of products and services to support marine protection and ocean governance initiatives, maximizing support of SMMEs for benefits of small harbor development or small harbor and coastal development. I think I'd rather leave it there, and then we can have an engagement from there, Chair. Thank you so much for that. And I'd just like to leave you with this. It's the second, I want to read it out, the second bullet, because it's quite interesting. So while we say that there are barriers to entry, because one of the key things of closing out SMMEs is the argument of barriers to entry. While we say that there are barriers to entry, in this sector particularly, most of the subsectors require highly specialized qualifications and skill sets. While that is the case, we are saying that established businesses in the global market, there are interventions that can be able to be pursued if there is commitment to capacity building and increasing participation, opening up the space for new players to enter the oceans economy through collaborations and also all other sectors. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Lwandile, for that very informative presentation, and really a lot of work has gone into, identifying what these value chains are in the oceans economy, because, a lot of the time you hear about the oceans economy, maybe you think fishing, maybe you think, it's just delivering containers from one country to another. But from what you've presented today, there's so much of depth to the ocean. Huh? There's so much of depth to it. And the value chains are considerably detailed. So I'd like again to open to the floor for questions. Please, if you have any questions for our presenters here today on construction and the oceans economy, please raise your hand, and we can channel the questions to them. Do we have any questions? I see Elize's got a question. Elize, we already know who you are, but just do a brief intro and say who your question's for.
I'm a big ocean lover, and I also stay in Simonstown, and I'm part of the TIPS team. From my perspective, in terms of plastics and ocean pollution and more the environmental side, and also maybe tourism, a lot of tourism activities, and also the penguins in Simonstown, we've got the nature being protected, and it drives a lot of tourism to the area. But I was just trying to think in your study, your outlook on the kind of tourism aspect, and also plastic, maybe, cleaning the ocean and that kind of, and obviously there's also you get bicycles, all the activities on the ocean now, but it's sensitive to the environment. We hear all the time about products being flushed in the ocean, pollution is dilution, is what someone told me in the coffee time. People, big industrial companies still diluting and flushing waste into the ocean. So I was just trying to think, if we're protecting the rhino and they've got security guards actually walking next to the rhinos in the wild, we also have people protecting the baboons in our area. But in terms of ocean wildlife and protecting that kind of element, that you maybe look at those areas. Is there an interest? Is it funded? Is it something that DFFE is also committed to do? Just be interesting to know. But I really enjoyed your presentation. So much opportunities for the ocean economy. Thank you.
Questions? Okay, comment. Please introduce yourself and say who your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Nondumiso Mfenyana from Saimi, part of that study. But it's just a comment from my side, and I would like to thank the presenters for those insightful presentations. I think there's a lot to be learned, compare notes from the first presenters, especially in the area of incubation. We know for a fact that this is fairly new on green, how do you call it? Green entrepreneurship. Greenpreneur, and even in the oceans economy, because we're talking about technical intensive areas of study, which are kind of novel in most of the SMMEs. So as much as incubation has been done in the country in other sectors, but there's a lot to be explored, there's a lot to be learned, lessons learned from this sector and how it can be rolled out even in the oceans economy subsectors. Thank you.
Please introduce yourself and say who your question is.
Good day. My name is Nomthanda Zompande. I'm from Poki Holdings. I'm a person with a disability, and I advocate for inclusiveness. Especially in the oceans economy, we've tried to find ways to include persons with disabilities. Can you probably in your study just indicate where they can play a role as well, so that that is also inclusive of the construction sector? I sit currently with a query from an entrepreneur from Venda, because I support entrepreneurs with disabilities, where they passed the whole session for assessment. They're blind. They've passed the assessment for construction, but now the department has decided to exclude them because they say they can't go to site, but that guy is building for the past 10 years, he's been in business. So those are some of the things I would love that they can be highlighted to either the safety policies, the OSH Acts, and so that then there is inclusiveness. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kiro, and I'm from the University of Johannesburg. My question is bordering on the Greenpreneur. Yeah, I want to find out how the Greenpreneur actually can navigate the risks or the threat of climate change, which is very much real, by the way, so that they don't jeopardize on the prospect of promoting green industrialization. Thank you.
We've got a fair batch of questions there. Did our presenters get all of those? Yeah, cool. So maybe start with our ladies here, Nokwanda and Nozipho, and then Lwandle.
Just to acknowledge the comment from Sis Nomtandazo. We also are very inclusive just as an organization, and we do work with entrepreneurs that really live with various impairments, if I can say. And we conduct baseline assessments. So the interventions that we provide to you are based off of your specific challenge that you experience in your business. So, and we do that across the board. Each business, each entrepreneur will have their own specific baseline assessment. So if there's specific challenges that you experience, we can, come up with interventions to help you in that. And same with women entrepreneurs and youth entrepreneurs that we work with as well. So just to acknowledge that. And then the second is navigating risks and threats of climate change as greenpreneurs. I think that's why we're here as well, to try and find those answers ourselves, because like you already said, the green economy is quite new, it's burgeoning. And if it's quite new, just for big businesses as well, just imagine the small business. So, I mean, we've got the climate change bill that was just assented, I think on the 23rd of July. And that bill really promises to create opportunities for SMMEs while also mitigating climate change risks. So we are also really interested in just how that bill will be, implemented and what SMMEs can do to get those opportunities, but also see the risks coming ahead of time.
Also, just to add on that, no one has mentioned that the green space is very new and it presents lots of opportunities for SMMEs. Just to make an example, the solar industry is booming, but it's only booming in the Northern Cape. So if you conduct enough research, you'll see that some of the provinces are behind with the solar installation. So as an entrepreneur, if you want to navigate that sector, research is very, very important, and making sure that you also do networking sessions with your existing clients as well. So if it's booming in the Northwest and they're employing, I think 20,000 employees are in that industry now. That means there's shortage in other provinces, so you can try and infiltrate that sector.
All right. Thank you. No, we're sharing the other one. No, thank you so much. So I'll start from the last one. I'll go to the former. Then I think the first one is around inclusion of people living with disabilities. I think you have a valid point. There's definitely an opportunity to even do further work on that, because to just leave it and say entrepreneur, when we understand that even the entrepreneurs themselves as individuals have different or are differently able, have different abilities. So that I totally agree with. And I think in this study though, we've not gone to that level. I do agree with you that there's an opportunity for further work that needs to be done on that. Then there was a comment around environmental aspects and related to the oceans economy. I think you also wanted to understand the efforts that are being employed by the government, in particular DFFE, in that regard. While I'm not their spokesperson, because I'm in private sector, but I know through research and also having previously been part that there's a national working group on spatial planning for the oceans economy. It's part and parcel of a work stream that was set up during Operation Pagisa called Marine Protection and Ocean Governance, or Marine and Governance. Part of the initiatives that are looked at there would include marine spatial development, which currently is not something that exists in South Africa. And within that marine spatial development, there are elements that you would need to look at. For example, if you speak about sea defense, what are some of the, how do you protect, what regulations do you put in place to protect the environment and to protect the sea? What other aspects can you be able to put in terms of ensuring that there's preservation of life at sea and all of that? So from that point of view, I do know that there are some efforts. The adequacy there of those efforts is something that I think we can all agree that there's a room for improvement. There's an opportunity to actually get that to be going that much further. Again, there are other areas around ecotourism that is looked at and so forth. So I think from where I'm sitting, I do agree in a principle that there's always a room for improvement around that. But I know for a fact that the sector, particularly government, there is interventions that have been done. My colleagues also want to add there at the back on this issue. On my side, I think I'm done. The other question was the two ladies that were being asked. Thank you so much.
So you mentioned there were some colleagues that wanted. Yes. Ah, okay. All right. On microplastics, yeah, great. Apparently, these things are living in our guts now. Sorry, can you just introduce yourself? Thanks.
My name is Otto Tati. I work at SAIMI. So we have a project that we are supporting at Cape Peninsula University of Technologies, CPUT, because they've got an intention of setting up a laboratory to look at the effect and the impact of microplastics. And it's not only just CPUT, but the University of the Western Cape as well. So there's quite a number of universities that are involved in research about the impact of microplastics. And we're hoping that as SAIMI, because we support them, we'll take the process further in this regard. We're also exploring partnerships with NGOs such as the Sustainable Seas Trusts to look at campaigns that are meant to prevent, littering and the single use of plastics and its impacts on the oceans. We've commissioned an expert now to look at how much the country has covered in respect of initiatives on environmental protection. Because, we're of the view that whilst some activities have been undertaken, we just want to measure the adequacy thereof for the country as well as the SADC region. It is the intention to go, through to the continent as a whole, because we recognize that South Africa by itself is never going to be achieve, all of these things. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. So unfortunately, we are prisoners to time, and we can't control time. I wish we could, but we have reached the end of our session. So thank you. Can we give another round of applause for our presenters here? I think they've been quite a lively bunch in the graveyard shift, right? So hats off to them. I just want to personally thank all of you for attending our session here today and contributing. We, at the will of the presenters, we will make whatever presentations are available. If you need to contact them as well around their research, around their initiatives, I'm sure that they will be happy to entertain you. So thank you so much, and I wish everyone a safe drive home.